Hello dear friends, Fisher here. Today I will talk a bit about myself, my life before coming to know Bruno's teaching, before having Bruno in my life, and also a book I have recently written about my cycling trip around Australia in 2014. It's called Two Wheels Down Under. I myself was born in the communist China in 1980s as an only child. Not because my parents wanted a small family, but because it was the law. The time was difficult for my family and many other families for many years because we were largely poor and struggled to keep our heads above water. We used food stamps for many years until I was 7 or 8 years old, and later our financial life got better, but I was unsatisfied with my life in China as a young adult, and my restlessness led me to Australia to have a different life. So I came to Australia in my early 20s, started with a difficult life as a poor student. My parents paid my tuition fee to study to become a registered nurse, and I paid for my own living expenses like many other students and immigrants. My early life in Australia was tough going. Work and study for my whole life, no holidays. The only holiday I have was to fly overseas to see my family, maybe about once in 2 years' time. And later, after I graduated from university and worked as an RN, I studied to make more money. So the material life was much better. I could eat the food I want, and I could buy things I want. But I was tormented by depression, which I grew up with in a crisis family, and also the dissatisfaction about my nursing job, and largely the life I was living at that moment. And I asked myself the question, am I going to work full-time, 5 days out of 7, until the end of my retirement, until the end of my life? What is the meaning of my life? That question always bothers me. So in late 2013, it began as a vague and then an overwhelming restlessness again. And that led me ultimately to cycle around Australia on my push bike. In Australia, we call push bike for a bicycle. I met countless nice people who really helped me, and regardless their skin color, regardless their backgrounds, their nationalities, I was helped by countless people, very, very kind-hearted people, and I felt blessed by God that I could survive my trip because I had many near misses, which could have killed me very easily, and I experienced God in His wonderful nature and in those kind people. I also tasted maximum freedom in the outback of Australia that freed my heart. So now, looking back, I realized it was the spiritual awakening of my soul and also the inner healing of my heart. And that cycle trip made me to open my mind too, to look at life at a very different angle and realize what I knew about life prior to my trip was almost nothing. I was like a frog sitting on the bottom of a well, perceiving the sky was only the shape of the well I lived in. So dear friends, there are much more informations in the book about how I grow, how I get better, how I realize there are much more to life, that we should not only look at ourselves and look at our life in the situation we are in now, but rather be open-minded to let ourselves be guided by God, by our heart, by our inner feeling, to achieve the highest good we possibly can. And don't be afraid to step out of our comfort zone. And I will put the link below. You can purchase from Lulu both ebook and paperback, and I hope you enjoy reading the book and different way of life. And I thank my two editors, Gary Wiseman and Leslie Crossingham, for their great work, their great contribution to the book, as well as all those wonderful people during my trip. And all profit of this book is dedicated to promote health. As for Bruno often said, health is the best gift God has given us on His divine earth. And finally, I thank God for all the beautiful things I'm allowed to experience in this life. You have a good day, dear friends, and God bless.